In a courtroom heavy with silence, the air felt thick, each breath measured, each glance weighted with anticipation. All eyes were fixed on the man at the center of it all, Sean "Diddy" Combs. For decades, he wasn't just a music mogul, he was a symbol of hustle, ambition, and reinvention. His beats ruled the charts, his brand defined an era, and his influence reached far beyond music. But today, none of that mattered. The judge's voice was steady, unshaken, as the sentence began to roll off the tongue. In that moment, time seemed to slow. The swagger, the confidence, the untouchable image, it all cracked. Diddy's eyes welled up, his lips trembling as emotion overtook him. And then, it happened. The tears fell. Gasps rippled quietly through the room. Some fans in the gallery clutched their phones, live tweeting what they were witnessing. Others sat completely still, faces pale, as if trying to process the impossible. Outside the courthouse, the world was already reacting, screens lighting up with breaking news alerts, social media timelines flooding with disbelief, anger, and sadness. How did the man who once stood at the pinnacle of pop culture, who built an empire from nothing, end up here, on the other side of the law? Was this justice served, or a tragedy unfolding before our eyes? And more importantly, what does this moment mean for the legacy he spent a lifetime building? Asterisk. Before the world saw tears in a courtroom, before headlines screamed of trials and sentencing, Sean "Diddy" Combs was the definition of success. Born Sean John Combs in Harlem, New York, he was no stranger to adversity. His father's life was cut short in a violent shooting when Diddy was just a child, a tragedy that would leave an unshakable mark, but also fuel his relentless drive. In the early 90s, a young, hungry Combs burst onto the music scene as an intern at Uptown Records, quickly climbing the ranks with a mix of charm, vision, and a work ethic that earned him the nickname Puff Daddy. His ability to spot talent was unmatched. Mary J. Blige, Jodeci, and countless others felt his influence early on. But this was only the beginning. By 1993, he founded Bad Boy Records, a label that would change the sound of hip-hop and R&B forever. And then came one of the most defining partnerships in music history. Diddy and the Notorious B.I.G. together, they created anthems that still echo today, from Juicy to Mo Money Mo Problems. His reputation as a hitmaker was solidified, but so was his image as a businessman who could transform raw street stories into global chart dominance. But Diddy wasn't just behind the scenes, he was front and center. As a solo artist, he delivered platinum albums, Grammy Awards, and unforgettable tracks like I'll Be Missing You, a heartfelt tribute to Biggie that topped charts worldwide. He wasn't just in the music business, he was the music business. And then there was the empire building. Fashion with Sean John, which brought hip-hop culture into high-end retail. Partnerships in spirits and beverages, Ciroc vodka became synonymous with his brand. Television and film appearances, reality shows, awards hosting, he seemed untouchable, a man who turned everything he touched into gold. Publicly, Diddy projected confidence, luxury, and ambition. He was photographed in tailored suits on private jets, throwing lavish white parties attended by Hollywood's elite. For many, he was a symbol of what was possible, a young black man from Harlem who had climbed to the peak of global influence through grit, creativity, and sheer willpower. But behind the sparkle and champagne, whispers began to grow. Rumors of legal disputes, backstage confrontations, and high-profile controversies. Diddy's career had weathered storms before, lawsuits, club incidents, public feuds, but each time, he emerged, polished and seemingly unscathed. To fans, he was bulletproof. To critics, he was a master of reinvention. So when the headlines began to turn darker, few believed it would ever come to this, a courtroom, a sentencing, and the image of a mogul brought to his knees. Before the fall, there was the climb. And to understand this moment, we must first remember the man the world thought they knew. Asterisk. From Grammy Awards to gripping courtroom scenes, the contrast couldn't be more jarring. Once, Diddy's name was called from the stage of the Staples Center as cameras flashed and cheers erupted. He'd walk up in a designer suit, golden trophy in hand, flashing that confident smile the world knew so well. The air was electric, the applause deafening. Fans saw him as a king of culture, a man who had not only shaped music but defined an era. Fast forward to today, and the stage has changed. The bright lights of the music world replaced by the harsh, unflinching glare of courtroom fluorescence. The roaring crowd swapped for silent rows of onlookers, some supporters, some skeptics, each holding their breath as the judge's words echoed through the chamber. The same man who once stood at the center of lavish parties now sat at a wooden defense table, flanked by attorneys, eyes wet with emotion. It's a fall so stark it feels almost unreal. We remember the champagne toasts, the diamond chains, the effortless swagger. But here, in this room, none of that mattered. The Grammys and gold records couldn't drown out the weight of the charges. The headlines weren't about platinum sales anymore, they were about allegations, trials, and a sentence that would change the rest of his life. From the red carpets of award nights to the cold, unforgiving benches of a courtroom, it's the kind of transformation that forces us to ask, how does a man go from the pinnacle of influence to the brink of ruin? And is this a story of justice, or a tragedy in slow motion? Long before the gavel struck and the courtroom fell silent, the whispers had already begun. They started faint, so faint you could almost dismiss them as tabloid noise. A blog post here, a blind item there, murmurings in the back alleys of the internet. At first, they were easy for fans to ignore. Diddy was untouchable, after all, an empire builder, a mogul who had danced through decades of scrutiny and always come out shining. But whispers have a way of growing louder. Soon, small talk at industry parties turned into cautious conversations. Reporters began asking more pointed questions in interviews, and the answers became more carefully worded. The first investigative pieces trickled out, stories that hinted at conflicts behind the velvet ropes, late-night incidents away from the cameras, and a lifestyle that, for all its glamour, carried shadows of controversy. Then came the leaks. Anonymous sources. Grainy photos and fragments of text messages that started circulating in the media. Lawyers began to make statements, measured, deliberate, almost rehearsed. What had once been vague gossip was now documented in official complaints. And for the first time, the public's perception of Diddy began to shift. The man who had once been a symbol of control and mastery over his image now seemed cornered. Behind the scenes, investigators were quietly piecing together timelines, cross-referencing witness accounts, and subpoenaing records. It wasn't just one story anymore, it was a web, and each new thread led to another knot. The headlines escalated, sources allege, authorities investigate, and finally, the words that sent shockwaves through the industry, criminal charges filed. Fans went from defending him on social media to anxiously refreshing news feeds. Every update felt heavier. The trial wasn't just looming, it was inevitable. And as the first day in court approached, one question burned in the minds of millions: were these just the inevitable trials of fame, or the first cracks in an empire built too high to stand forever? Asterisk. When the formal charges finally landed, they did so like a thunderclap, loud, shocking, and impossible to ignore. They weren't just headlines, they were accusations that threatened to dismantle everything Diddy had built over decades. The prosecution's language was careful, deliberate, and, at times, chilling. Words like conspiracy, misconduct, and financial impropriety were uttered in the same breath as his name, a name once synonymous with success, luxury, and influence. Yet, in these early stages, much of it remained shrouded in legal fog. Prosecutors spoke in calculated statements, revealing just enough to spark curiosity and alarm, but holding back the full picture. There were references to events behind closed doors, business dealings that raised red flags, and alleged personal actions that, if proven true, would shatter the public image of the man millions had admired. The charges hinted at layers, a surface story the media could digest, and a deeper narrative hidden away in sealed evidence files. And that mystery only amplified the speculation. Was this a case of justice closing in on a man who had flown too close to the sun, or the latest chapter in a long history of high-profile figures targeted by relentless scrutiny? For Diddy, the courtroom was no longer just a legal arena, it was a stage upon which his legacy hung in the balance. And for the rest of us watching, these charges weren't merely legal bullet points, they were the first notes of a symphony that would crescendo in the trial to come. Asterisk. The road to sentencing day wasn't a straight path, it was a slow, twisting descent, each turn revealing a new shock, a new layer of tension. It began months, even years, before the gavel would finally strike. In the early days, whispers swirled, first in the blogs, then in the entertainment press, and eventually in mainstream headlines. Stories emerged about questionable business deals, late-night meetings, and unresolved disputes that suddenly seemed more suspicious in hindsight. At first, they were brushed off as the price of fame. But then came the subpoenas, quietly served, strategically timed. The investigation unfolded like a drama written for television, except it was painfully real. Federal agents made visits. Long-time associates were called in for questioning. Documents, once thought buried in corporate archives, resurfaced in the hands of prosecutors. The tension grew with each leak, each anonymous tip, each rumor confirmed. The trial date was set. Cameras lined the courthouse steps on the morning of the first hearing. Fans came too, some with homemade signs of support, others with bold accusations written in marker. Inside, the defense moved with confidence, countering every statement, challenging every witness. But as the weeks went on, cracks began to show. Key testimonies from former insiders painted a different picture, one the public had never seen. There were delays, procedural battles, even moments when it seemed like the case might collapse. But then, in a decisive turn, prosecutors unveiled new evidence. It was enough to push the case over the edge, enough to make even the most loyal supporters sit up and wonder. By the time sentencing day arrived, the city felt it in the air, a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. Reporters camped outside overnight. Social media buzzed with speculation. Some predicted leniency, citing his contributions to music and culture. Others demanded the maximum penalty, framing it as a moment of justice long overdue. And so, as the courthouse doors opened that morning, the world tuned in. Whatever happened inside would mark the end of one story and the irreversible beginning of another. The courthouse stood as a fortress of solemnity amid the chaos surrounding it. Outside, a sea of cameras flashed incessantly, the air buzzing with a cocktail of anticipation, anxiety, and hope. Fans had transformed the cold pavement into a vigil of loyalty, some sitting on worn blankets, others pacing nervously, murmuring prayers or exchanging stories of how Sean "Diddy" Combs had touched their lives. The media circus was relentless, reporters jockeyed for position, their voices rising and falling like waves crashing against the stone steps. Inside those hallowed walls, a stark contrast unfolded. The courtroom was a cathedral of silence, every breath, every subtle shuffle echoing with weight. Diddy sat in the defendant's chair, a man accustomed to commanding attention with charisma and thunderous beats, now reduced to a figure quietly bearing the gravity of fate. His hands, usually steady at the helm of empire building, clenched in restless defiance. Eyes darted between the judge, the prosecutor, and the silent spectators, 1,000 unspoken thoughts colliding behind his calm facade. When the judge's voice broke the stillness, it felt like a physical blow. The words hung heavy in the air: 5 years of probation, community service mandated, justice served but tempered with mercy. The sentence itself was measured, but the effect was seismic. Then, something unexpected. A tear traced down Diddy's cheek, slow, unmistakable. The room shifted. Cameras zoomed in, capturing a vulnerability rarely seen in a man of his stature. The tear was more than water, it was a symbol. A crack in the armor, a glimpse into the man beneath the legend. The moment defied expectations and stunned everyone present. Fans watching through live feeds gasped, some whispered prayers, others fell silent in disbelief. Outside, the reaction was electric. Phones were thrust skyward, recording and streaming the raw emotion as it unfolded. Across social media platforms, the hashtag Diddy cried exploded, trending within minutes. Thousands of voices chimed in, some offering support, others expressing shock, a few questioning what it meant for the future of a man who had always seemed untouchable. But this wasn't just about a sentence. It was a narrative of resilience, of human fragility colliding with public spectacle. The tears told a story of pressure that fame could never mask, the weight of expectations, the battle between public persona and private pain. In the hours that followed, fans gathered not just outside the courthouse but in parks and community centers. Candles were lit, chants whispered softly into the night air. The vigil was more than a show of support, it was a collective embrace, an acknowledgement that behind the headlines was a man grappling with the same fears and hopes as anyone else. And as dusk settled, the media circled back, their evening newscasts replaying the moments with a mixture of reverence and intrigue. The question lingered, what lies ahead for Sean "Diddy" Combs? The verdict was in, but the story was far from over. As the courtroom drama unfolded, legal experts across the nation tuned in, dissecting every word, every nuance of the proceedings. Their voices, measured and precise, added a layer of context that transformed the spectacle into a complex legal tapestry. One seasoned analyst remarked, the sentence handed down to Sean Combs reflects a balancing act. On one hand, the court acknowledges the severity of the charges, asserting that no one is above the law. On the other, the probation and community service indicate a recognition of his philanthropic contributions and public standing. Another expert weighed in, noting, probation in a high-profile case like this serves multiple purposes. It holds the defendant accountable without resorting to incarceration, which could provoke public backlash and potentially disrupt the broader cultural and economic ecosystem tied to his enterprises. The narrator's tone deepened with significance. This expert perspective revealed the intricate dance between justice and public perception. It underscored how, in cases involving celebrities, the legal system must often navigate treacherous waters, balancing fairness, deterrence, and the court of public opinion. Yet, some analysts expressed skepticism. There's an undeniable pressure on judges when ruling on cases of this magnitude, one commented. They must send a message without appearing either too harsh or too lenient. It's a tightrope walk. And that visible tear from Mr. Combs? While humanizing, it also adds emotional complexity that courts typically try to avoid during sentencing. The courtroom, though still and silent, was alive with this undercurrent, an unseen dialogue between law, emotion, and society. The narration shifted seamlessly back to the broader scene. As the expert voices faded from the immediate spotlight, the weight of their analyses lingered, echoing in conversations among fans and commentators alike. The verdict was not just a legal decree but a chapter in a larger story about accountability, influence, and the human condition. As the trial progressed, the courtroom transformed into a stage where truth, memory, and emotion intertwined. Witness after witness took the stand, their testimonies weaving a complex tapestry around the events in question. Each voice carried weight, some steady and composed, others trembling with the gravity of their words. The first to testify was a longtime associate of Sean Combs, a man who had stood by him through years of triumph and turmoil. Calm and measured, he recounted the moments leading up to the incident that sparked the case. His testimony was precise, painting a picture of events with clinical detail but betraying hints of loyalty beneath his words. Next came a security officer, whose keen observations formed a critical part of the prosecution's narrative. His voice was firm as he described what he saw, the tension escalating, the heated exchanges, the split-second decisions that rippled into consequences. The officer's account added a chilling clarity, grounding the abstract notions of guilt and innocence in stark reality. Then, unexpectedly, a community leader took the stand. Known for bridging divides, she spoke not just to the incident but to the man behind the headlines. Her testimony illuminated Diddy's efforts to uplift neighborhoods, support youth programs, and foster hope in places often overlooked. Her words provided a counterbalance, a reminder of the duality at the heart of this trial. Perhaps the most gripping testimony came from a bystander, a young woman whose chance presence captured an unfiltered snapshot of that fateful day. Her voice quivered with emotion as she recounted the chaos, the fear, and the moments that seemed suspended in time. She spoke of shock, confusion, and ultimately, the human cost beneath the public spectacle. Each testimony added dimension and depth, peeling back layers to reveal a man both flawed and formidable. The courtroom hung on every word, aware that these stories were more than just evidence, they were fragments of a life scrutinized under the harshest light. As the last witness stepped down, a hush settled over the room. The judge's gaze swept the courtroom, signaling that the moment of reckoning was near. In these voices, the truth had been laid bare, raw, complicated, and deeply human. The morning of the sentencing dawned gray and overcast, mirroring the heavy mood inside the courthouse. As the clock edged closer to the appointed hour, every second seemed to stretch, thick with anticipation. Inside the courtroom, whispers died down, the rustle of papers and the soft click of cameras set the stage for what would be a defining moment. Diddy entered the courtroom with measured steps, the weight of the day evident in his posture. His usual confident stride was tempered by a quiet tension, a man bracing for judgment. The judge, robed in solemn black, took her seat with practiced gravity, her eyes scanning the room, then resting on the defendant. Silence fell, so complete it was almost tangible. The bailiff's voice cut through with the formal call to order, and all eyes fixed on the judge. With deliberate calm, she began to speak, her words clear, her tone steady but heavy with consequence. As the court has found the defendant guilty, it is my duty to impose a sentence that reflects both the nature of the offense and the character of the individual, she intoned, her voice echoing softly against the wood-paneled walls. Diddy sat rigid, hands clenched on his lap. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every subtle movement, a tightening jaw, a flicker in his eyes. The courtroom held its collective breath. The judge continued, outlining the sentence, probation for 5 years, combined with 200 hours of community service. The verdict was firm but tempered with recognition of his past contributions. Yet it was the final moments that would resonate most deeply. As the judge uttered the last words, a single tear broke free from Diddy's eye, slow and undeniable. The room shifted instantly. For a man known for his unyielding presence, this tear was a window into raw humanity. It spoke louder than any words could. The cameras flashed wildly, the sound of shutters snapping like a sudden storm. Even the judge paused, a flicker of empathy crossing her features before she composed herself. Outside, fans watching on screens gasped. Social media erupted in real time. The hashtag Diddy cried exploded, trending within minutes, a digital monument to an unforgettable moment. Inside the courtroom, murmurs rippled as attendees processed the emotional weight. This was not just a sentencing, it was a collective moment of vulnerability, a reminder that behind the celebrity was a man confronting his fate. As the bailiff called the session adjourned, Diddy stood slowly, the gravity of the day etched into his expression. Cameras followed him as he exited, fans' voices rising in a mixture of support and disbelief. This was a day that would be remembered, not just for the sentence, but for the humanity revealed in the quietest tear. The courtroom doors opened, and Sean Diddy Combs entered, his presence commanding the room despite the solemn atmosphere. Clad in a tailored dark suit, his usual swagger was muted, replaced by a palpable tension that radiated from every measured step he took toward the defendant's seat. Cameras swiveled instantly, capturing the moment, the man who had ruled music charts now facing the gravity of justice with quiet dignity. As Diddy settled, the prosecutor rose for their final remarks. Their voice was firm but controlled, articulating a narrative that underscored the seriousness of the charges without veering into theatrics. This case, they intoned, is about accountability. No individual, regardless of fame or fortune, is exempt from the consequences of their actions. Every word was deliberate, meant to resonate not just with the court but with the public watching beyond these walls. The prosecutor's gaze briefly met Diddy's, unwavering and resolute. The judge, seated with a stoic expression, exuded authority tempered with empathy. Her posture was upright, hands folded gently before her, eyes sharp yet compassionate. As she listened, her subtle nods conveyed attentiveness, and the slight furrow of her brow hinted at the weight she carried in balancing justice with humanity. Her tone, when she finally spoke, was steady but carried an undeniable gravity, an acknowledgement of the defendant's impact and the community's need for closure. Then came the exact moment that shifted the room's energy irrevocably. As the judge pronounced the sentence, a fragile quiet descended. Diddy's face, so often a mask of confidence, softened. His breath hitched almost imperceptibly. And then, a single tear traced a slow, shimmering path down his cheek. The break in his composure was subtle but seismic. It was not just sorrow, it was relief, regret, and the overwhelming weight of consequence converging in one vulnerable instant. The courtroom collectively inhaled, witnessing a side of the icon rarely seen, a man laid bare before the law and the world. As news of the sentencing spread like wildfire, the world outside the courtroom exploded in a tidal wave of emotion. Social media platforms became the digital arena where fans, critics, and casual observers alike poured out their feelings, raw, unfiltered, and deeply personal. Twitter was the first to light up, its timeline flooding with a mosaic of voices. One tweet read simply, "Never thought I'd see Diddy break like that. Real human moment." #Diddy cried, a stark reminder that beneath the celebrity facade lay a man grappling with the weight of his choices. Another user wrote, "Justice served, but that tear, it hit different. Fame can't shield you from pain." This sentiment echoed across thousands of replies and retweets, sparking threads where people debated the nature of celebrity, accountability, and vulnerability. Instagram became a gallery of heartfelt posts. Fans shared photos of Diddy throughout his career, from platinum records to philanthropic efforts, paired with captions that blended admiration and empathy. One fan wrote, "He's given so much to the community. This moment shows his humanity. Prayers up." Another posted a short video montage, the soundtrack swelling as the tearful moment played in slow motion, inviting reflection on fame's double-edged sword. TikTok's creativity blossomed in real time. Clips circulated showing reenactments, memes, and emotional reactions from everyday people witnessing the sentencing live. Some videos featured heartfelt monologues, young fans expressing shock and sorrow, others crafting poetic voiceovers about redemption and consequence. One particularly moving TikTok showed a group of teenagers sitting in a circle, discussing how Diddy's vulnerability shattered the myth of invincibility. "It's like seeing a hero fall, but also rise," one said, voice thick with emotion. The clip quickly went viral, amassing millions of views and sparking a wave of similar content. The reactions weren't all sympathy. Some fans expressed frustration, voicing that fame sometimes seemed to afford leniency. Comments poured in, "Shouldn't tears change the sentence? Justice has to be blind." Yet even these critiques acknowledged the power of that tear, a moment that transcended legal arguments and touched on the human story beneath the headlines. Throughout the day, media outlets dissected the public response. Social commentators highlighted how this moment had cracked open conversations about celebrity accountability, mental health, and the harsh glare of the public eye. Panel discussions debated whether the emotional display would influence public opinion and, by extension, legacy. As the hours passed, the hashtag Diddy cried evolved beyond a trending topic, it became a symbol of complexity. For some, it was a moment of compassion, for others, a reminder that justice's path is rarely simple. In homes, cafes, and street corners worldwide, people spoke of that tear as if it were a mirror reflecting their own struggles, a moment where the larger-than-life figure seemed, at last, profoundly human. As the digital floodgates opened, two powerful currents emerged, loyal fans rallying around Diddy, and critics insisting that justice had finally been served. This clash of perspectives shaped the social media landscape into a vibrant, sometimes volatile arena. On one side, devoted supporters flooded timelines with messages of unwavering loyalty. Tweets like, "Diddy has always been about lifting others up. We stand with him through this tough time," poured in, accompanied by heartfelt pleas for compassion. Instagram stories featured fan art, clips of his philanthropic work, and calls to remember the man behind the headlines. Everyone makes mistakes. This moment doesn't define him, his legacy is bigger than this, one ardent fan declared, capturing the essence of a protective devotion that refused to waver. Many loyalists framed Diddy's tear not as weakness but as strength, proof of a man confronting his faults head-on. Videos circulated with slow, reverent music underscoring the tearful moment, with captions like, "Real recognizes real." Only a genuine soul can show that kind of vulnerability. These fans spoke of redemption, growth, and the power of owning one's mistakes. Yet, standing firm in stark contrast were the voices of critics, resolute and unsparing. For them, the sentence was long overdue, and Diddy's emotional display was seen less as vulnerability and more as a plea for sympathy. Justice served. "No celebrity gets a pass," became a rallying cry echoing across comment sections and TikTok replies alike. These voices called for accountability without exceptions. "Tears don't erase actions. The law is the law," read one pointed tweet. Others highlighted the need for fairness, emphasizing that fame and fortune should never shield anyone from consequences. Some critics acknowledged the emotional weight of the moment but warned against letting it cloud judgment. "Feelings are valid, but the truth must stand above all," a popular legal commentator tweeted, summing up the prevailing sentiment in this camp. This polarized reaction ignited spirited debates across platforms, where fans and critics sparred over hashtags and comment threads. Some exchanges were respectful, others heated, reflecting the broader societal struggle to balance empathy with justice. What united them, however, was an acknowledgement that this moment had cracked open a profound conversation about fame, accountability, and humanity. In the midst of this, neutral observers weighed in with a more nuanced view, suggesting that both sides held truths. They pointed to the tear as a reminder of the complex emotions wrapped up in legal proceedings involving public figures, where private pain meets public scrutiny. Thus, the digital sphere became a microcosm of the trial's impact, a vivid clash of loyalty and justice, compassion and consequence, empathy and responsibility. It was a reminder that beneath the headlines, beneath the courtrooms, lies a world wrestling with the meaning of redemption and the price of fame. Social media did more than simply report the events, it became the crucible where the story of Diddy's sentencing was forged, fractured, and amplified. In an age where every moment can be broadcast, dissected, and debated in real time, platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok didn't just reflect public opinion, they shaped it. The immediacy of social media meant that reactions weren't delayed by hours or days, they erupted instantaneously. A single clip of Diddy's tearful moment circulated within minutes, sparking a cascade of responses that rippled across the globe. Hashtags trended, viral videos multiplied, and influencers weighed in, each adding their own spin, perspective, or emotional take. This rapid-fire environment blurred the line between news and narrative. Facts mingled with speculation, sympathy with skepticism, personal stories with public judgment. The echo chambers of social media fueled passionate debates, sometimes productive, often polarizing, turning a courtroom event into a cultural moment that transcended legal boundaries. Beyond individual posts, social media's algorithms magnified the most emotionally charged content. Videos of Diddy's breakdown were replayed countless times, each viewing deepening the emotional imprint. Fan-made tributes gained traction, as did sharp critiques and calls for justice, creating a swirling mosaic of voices competing for attention and influence. Moreover, social media empowered everyday people to become commentators, storytellers, and even activists. Ordinary users shared not just reactions but personal reflections, connecting Diddy's moment to broader themes of accountability, redemption, and mental health. This democratization of narrative challenged traditional media's gatekeeping role, making public discourse more immediate but also more fragmented. At the same time, social media shaped the narrative beyond the individual moment. It framed how the public understood Diddy, not just as a defendant, but as a complex human being wrestling with his past and future. It transformed a legal sentence into a collective story of fallibility and resilience. Yet, this power came with risks. The speed and volume of social media reactions sometimes amplified misinformation and harsh judgment, overshadowing nuance. In this digital arena, context was often lost in the rush to react, and moments of empathy were sometimes drowned out by outrage or fandom. As the dust settled from the courtroom drama, attention swiftly shifted to the experts, seasoned lawyers and legal analysts tasked with unraveling the complexities of the case for the public. Their voices brought clarity to the dense legal terrain, providing insight into what the sentencing truly meant beyond the headlines. One prominent defense attorney began by highlighting the nuances of the charges and the legal strategies employed. This case hinged on a delicate balance between intent and consequence, she explained. Diddy's legal team skillfully navigated the evidentiary challenges, pushing for mitigating factors that ultimately influenced the sentencing. Her analysis underscored how prosecutors had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt not only the facts but the defendant's mindset, an often overlooked but critical component in high-profile trials. Another expert, a former prosecutor turned legal commentator, offered a contrasting perspective. He emphasized the significance of the sentence as a precedent. This is a clear message to the public and to other celebrities alike. No one is above the law, he stated firmly. The judiciary's decision reinforces the principle of accountability, sending ripples through the entertainment industry and beyond. His remarks highlighted how the case extended far past a single individual, touching on broader themes of justice and equality. The legal panel also delved into the judge's role, her discretion in weighing the facts, the law, and the defendant's character. One analyst remarked, her tone and body language during sentencing were telling. She balanced firmness with empathy, signaling a nuanced understanding of the human dimensions in legal decisions. The subtle interplay of authority and compassion was a recurring theme, illustrating the judge's tightrope walk between upholding justice and acknowledging personal struggle. Further commentary addressed potential long-term implications. Discussions centered on how this sentencing might influence future cases involving celebrities, particularly regarding media coverage and public perception. High-profile trials are a double-edged sword, noted another expert. They bring attention but also pressure courts and legal teams to maintain impartiality in an intensely scrutinized environment. One seasoned PR consultant explained, recovery isn't just about issuing statements or apologies. It's a complex process of rebuilding trust, reshaping public perception, and often, redefining a personal brand. She emphasized the necessity of authenticity, cautioning that audiences today are quick to see through hollow gestures. Fans crave genuine accountability and consistent action over time. Without that, any comeback attempt risks backfiring spectacularly. Another expert added that timing was everything. Rushing to speak too soon can appear defensive, waiting too long can make it seem like the celebrity is evading responsibility. The challenge lies in finding the right balance between transparency and strategic silence. She noted that social media's relentless pace means there's little room for error. A misstep can spiral into a full-blown PR crisis overnight. Industry insiders weighed in next, their reactions revealing a complex web of loyalty and self-preservation. Some peers publicly voiced support for Diddy, praising his contributions to music, culture, and philanthropy. "We all make mistakes," one fellow artist tweeted. "What matters is how you move forward, and I believe Diddy will come back stronger." These expressions of solidarity underscored the deep connections and shared histories within the entertainment community. Conversely, others chose to distance themselves, perhaps wary of reputational risk or differing personal values. Statements ranged from carefully worded neutrality to pointed reminders about accountability. "The industry must hold everyone to the same standards," remarked a prominent producer in a recent interview. "Support is one thing, but excusing wrongdoing is another." This spectrum of reactions reflected the broader tension within the celebrity ecosystem, a balancing act between camaraderie and caution, between public image and private belief. PR experts pointed out that how peers respond can heavily influence public opinion. Endorsements can soften criticism, while silence or distancing can amplify doubt. In today's interconnected world, peer reactions become part of the narrative itself, one strategist noted. They can either pave the way for redemption or deepen the divide. In the wake of Diddy's sentencing, the public eye inevitably turned to history, looking back at the tumultuous journeys of other celebrities whose lives were forever altered by scandal and legal battles. These cases offer stark lessons about fame, fallibility, and the fragile nature of reputation. Consider Martha Stewart, once the queen of lifestyle branding, whose 2004 conviction for insider trading sent shockwaves through both Wall Street and Main Street. Her carefully crafted image of grace and domestic perfection seemed unshakable, until the law intervened. Yet, Martha's story also reveals the power of reinvention. After serving her sentence, she staged a remarkable comeback, rebuilding her brand and reclaiming her place in popular culture. Her case underscored a vital truth: even the most severe fall doesn't necessarily signal the end. With calculated moves and relentless resilience, redemption is possible. In stark contrast stands the saga of R. Kelly, whose sentencing on multiple charges of sexual abuse and misconduct brought a darker, more permanent reckoning. Unlike Martha Stewart's narrative of comeback, R. Kelly's reputation crumbled beyond repair. His legal troubles unveiled layers of alleged harm that led to widespread condemnation, professional blacklisting, and a near-total erasure from mainstream platforms. His case serves as a sobering example of how certain transgressions, particularly those involving exploitation and abuse, carry consequences that linger indefinitely, leaving little room for public forgiveness. Beyond these marquee examples, countless other celebrities have faced their own reckonings, some managing to navigate the storm, others succumbing to the pressure. From athletes caught in doping scandals to actors entangled in personal controversies, history paints a complex picture of how fame can both shield and expose. What unites these stories is the underlying truth that celebrity is a double-edged sword, granting immense influence but also subjecting individuals to intense scrutiny. Reputation, once shattered, is painstaking to rebuild and sometimes impossible to reclaim. As Diddy's case unfolds, these historical parallels remind us that the path forward is uncertain. Will this be a chapter of redemption, resilience, and renewal? Or a cautionary tale of reputation undone? The verdict is not just in the courtroom, it's in the court of public opinion, shaped over time by actions, responses, and the unforgiving lens of history. With the courtroom drama behind him, the pressing question now is, what lies ahead for Diddy? The legal journey is far from over. His defense team has already signaled intentions to file an appeal, seeking to challenge aspects of the verdict or sentencing. Appeals can be long, grueling processes, often taking months, sometimes years, with no guarantees of success. For Diddy, every legal maneuver will be scrutinized not only by courts but by a public hungry for answers. If the appeal fails, the next chapter may involve prison life, a stark contrast to the glitz and glamour of his past. Navigating incarceration is a daunting reality, particularly for high-profile figures. Prison is unforgiving, and the transition demands resilience and adaptability. How Diddy adjusts to this environment, and the support he receives, will significantly shape his personal and public narrative. Outside prison walls, questions swirl about the future of his sprawling business empire. From his music label to lucrative brand endorsements and lifestyle ventures, Diddy's holdings represent a complex web of interests. Industry insiders speculate on potential impacts. Will partners distance themselves? Will his companies face financial strain or leadership shakeups? The entertainment and business worlds are watching closely, aware that the fate of his empire could influence market confidence and cultural trends. Equally uncertain is the future of his music catalog, an enduring symbol of his influence. Streaming platforms, licensing deals, and royalties continue to generate revenue, but controversies often cast shadows over artists' legacies. Record labels and rights holders may grapple with balancing profit and public relations in the months to come. Perhaps the most profound question is one of legacy. When history looks back on Diddy, what will define his story? Will the music, the hits that shaped hip-hop and pop culture, outshine the scandal? Or will the shadow of legal troubles and personal struggle become the dominant narrative? Legacy is a delicate dance between past achievements and present realities, constantly rewritten by time and collective memory. Diddy's story is still being written, but this chapter has left fans divided, the industry shaken, and the world watching closely. Was this justice served, or a tragic fall from grace? We want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts and reactions below. Don't go anywhere, stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll bring you exclusive details from inside his first days behind bars. This story is far from over.